Overkill. Oh, hey, we're live. Sick. I might use post it in general for now. Okay. Right. Sick. Let's see. I'm gonna make sure we've got a few people here. And some people joining in on the stream. Sick. I think we're ready then. Marcus, take your place so I can introduce you.
All right.
Good. Right. So this is going to be an awkward introduction, but hey, everyone. My name is GPixel. I have not rehearsed this at all. We're Noxcrew, and we're doing a masterclass on level design. Woo! So the people with you today, except for me, we have Antlayer, Marcus. Say hi, please.
Hello.
And then we got Frankenstein, Stein, however you want to pronounce it. Tom, say hi, please.
Hello.
And then we got Jake, which is just Jake.
Hello.
And finally, we got She's Your Pasta Tour. We can't speak right now, so you're gonna have to live with that. Anyway, we're gonna probably wait like a few more seconds to make sure we have all people tune in ready. But yeah, this is also honorary guest Arcaniacs, who's here for some reason. Cool. I don't know, that's the introduction. We can speak now. We can be casual.
I don't think you need to go to spectator. Don't look like you'll be bumping into other people.
Yeah. So let me just get thing up. Right, I think we have quite a few people ready now. So we might as well get started. So this masterclass is going to be a bit structured differently from what most people are used to. We're quite a lot of people here, but we're going to have our own sections kind of to go through. Level design is obviously a very broad aspect. So we're going to try to fit as much as we can into tiny sections, and hopefully that will satisfy some people. Should tweet that you're live. I did actually. We have tweeted that, so people should be able to see it. Well, yeah, technically. So let me just get this thing up. Boop. Here we go. Epic. Right, so I might as well, list out what we're going to do today so people know what's going on. We're going to start out by having like a brief explanation of a thing that we call City Living Scale Map. So City Living is one of the projects Noxcrew made for the marketplace a while ago. And Marcus is going to present a tiny version of it, which is what we used when we planned the actual project before the execution. So it's going to give you a little rundown of how we do that planning for the project and, what the different things mean. Then we're going to have Tom explain a bit about color boxing, which most of you should be familiar with. So use structuring a structure or anything really before you actually build it, essentially. So you're going to have like how you plan a building and how you kind of puzzle it together. And then we're going to have Tor, which is, well, technically it's going to be me representing Tor's part since Tor can't speak with us today, sadly. But that's going to be a classic reference material to micro building. So kind of how we digest our reference material when we make maps, and how that turns out in a build and how we smash it together. Then we're going to have Jake present a small puzzle that he's created for us and how you kind of implement that to build. He's going to go through some of the details of how his mindset's doing that, which would be really cool. And then finally, I'm going to finish up with a little quick rundown of signposting, which is a very essential part of level design. So it's guiding your players throughout the level or throughout your map. It's kind of like, instead of having signs tell you where to go, you have things telling you where to go, which is, level design in itself, making sure that people know where they're supposed to go without us having explicitly to tell them, go from here to over there. So that's what we have planned. Of course, we're going to mess up sometimes, but I hope that you all are going to enjoy it. We had a lot of fun making it, so I think we might as well get started. Marcus, do you want to lead us to the entry of the museum or whatever we have?
Yes. Okay. Let's go.
Let's go.
When I built this museum, I made it purposefully a little bit bigger, so you'd have time to talk about things when you're moving from one place to another. I don't actually have anything to say. So just begin. So this is the scale map for the Bedrock Marketplace map, City Living, that Noxcrew released last year. And it's basically a creative toolbox map, or what we call that, which means that it's supposed to be played in creative mode. And there's a wide variety of furniture you can place on the floor and rotate as you wish. And obviously you'll be able to do just basic Minecraft building, destroy anything you want, remodel anything, you know how it goes. So what I'm going to be talking about is how we planned it, and what are the advantages of planning it in the way we did, and also what are the features of this map that you might find interesting. So I hope I don't have to explicitly tell anyone how good it is to plan things in advance in life and work generally. When you have an explicit plan at the start, it means that you'll be able to go through the process much faster. Everyone's going to be on the same page and able to refer back to the plan in moments of confusion. And there's a coherent vision from the start where everyone knows if they're going to be making additions later, that it will fit the big picture. So when I started making the plan, the idea was obviously to make a city, and most people have had their hand at making one in Minecraft. So one of the most important considerations was to show all the kinds of dwellings you can have in the city. So obviously you have apartments, you have detached houses, you'll have some trailer parks, you can have luxurious apartment in the top of the skyscraper, or like more low-income flat in a poorer part of the city. And obviously you have to be able as a player to live out your fantasy of living in a big city. So the way we did this is like give the players some what we call focus apartments around the city, which are basically like signposted to the players very explicitly in this case. And they are like empty apartments you can decorate for yourself. And the other apartments in the city are like fully interior, previously by us. And the players have to have opportunities to like do everything you would expect to do in a city if you were living there. You were just playing with Legos or whatever, or playing in the yard. So first things first, like why do a scale map? Like, well, obviously when it's done like this, you can already see like what size it is, and you can plan ahead in time how long it's gonna take. What I did at the start, if you come here in the corner, I don't know how this will work, but I did a rough approximation of like the different kinds of builds we'll have, like and divided them up to big builds, medium builds, and small builds, where big build would be something like a skyscraper, medium build, something like, say, department store. Small build would be a, let's say, detached house. And based on the plan, I counted them up and like approximated how long it would be to do each kind of build. And you can see that what the plan was. Obviously no plan survived the first 2 minutes of combat, so it ended up taking quite a bit longer, but it was a nice idea. Because it's a creative map, we had to foster the creativity of the players a lot, which means that it needed to be colorful and full of activities for you to do as well. But as you can see, referring to the scale map, there's grid above the whole thing, and when you combine that with the Dynamap, you can like easily move that to world edit, rather world machine or whatever we use, and like create the base plate for us to start building it in real size. So also when you do the scale map this way, you can very easily consider all the sidelines that you're gonna use. Like when building a city, you need to have the like closed in spaces inside the city where you can't even see the sky, but you also have to have some wilderness around it where you can like see the city skyline, maybe like during night or whatever. And you can easily consider stuff like if there's a big long road, like you need to put something at the end of it to make it seem interesting. So at first I started like listing all the things that you need to have in a city, like obviously a police station, fire department, mall, like downtown, skyscrapers or whatever. And then started just placing them on the map. And of course, this city is not like really realistic or anything. It's much more compacted version of it. So much like GTA does. That's the gold standard for cities. So I trust everyone knows. And then after listing all the things, I started thinking about like what goes next to what. Obviously, you have to have the school nearby where people live in their suburbs. You need to have like the hotel next to the beach. You need to have the industry near the harbor, stuff like that. And what helps enormously with this is actually like doing a lot of walking around real life cities. But you can easily, if you can't do that, if you don't travel much or your hometown is boring or whatever, you can always go to Google Maps and just drive around interesting places. And then once I had the idea of how the city fits together, started going around and finding interesting buildings, finding reference material for what we're gonna do. Of course, Lucas will be talking later how to move stuff from reference material to Minecraft. So it was also important to like plan stuff in as much detail as possible from the start. So all the builders could basically just plug things in without needing much other direction. And when they have the reference material also available, so of course process much quicker and easier. So another thing was that we wanted to show the like grimy side of life as well, like show the poor apartments as well, like nothing nasty or anything like that, but it makes it feel more real when it's not just like a polished fantasy where you just live in your rooftop apartment or whatever. Like one guy who's actually from Croatia built like house he had seen in real life in Bosnia or something, which is not something you tend to see on the marketplace because it's a bit more polished usually. But I think it's an important factor. One thing also was that we needed to consider how players will be moving through the map. So obviously walking, the thing to do with that, don't make the map too big. We are already doing that, that's fine. Driving, you need to have wide roads for them to zoom around and not get stuck. And additionally, we came up with the, well, not came up, but we decided on the idea of using glazed terracotta as road markings. So we needed to make the whole city pretty flat to accommodate for that. So obviously it don't work on slopes. And stuff like the golden prayer plates represent helicopter pads in here because the player gets a helicopter and needs places to land and get those. And stuff like you can see the redstone line going around. That's actually the bus route, the only bus route in the city, with the stops as well. So if you get in a bus, you know what to do. Like we marked it out in the city. And one interesting feature of the map is that from the start, I didn't want to make it any single city. Like it's not a copy of New York or Tokyo or whatever. But rather it was a combination of multiple cities in the world in a way that you could, like the aim was that you could walk through the city one street, maybe you are in New York, but then you could turn the corner and you are in London. And oh, well, you can just rewind the VOD and slow me down or whatever.
If there's any part that you don't fully comprehend at some point, you can watch back on the stream because we're going to post it on YouTube eventually.
And basically, all right, okay, good. So you can see in the air, there's like different areas of it marked down. There's like a waterfront Amsterdam type area. There's one street that's from Britain, and obviously the Times Square type area. And then you have the wilderness around it. I'm just scrolling through my notes now. This is that part.
I think that's a good chunk of explaining a lot of the things.
Yeah.
I can say that also.
Well,
yeah, go on.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I can say that also. Another thing which is really useful with these things is that since we all work in a team, a lot of the people miss the opportunity to do this, because when you work in a team, of course, teamwork and communication is really important, especially when you make something on this scale. And when you have something planned out like this, it makes it really easy for people who, for example, if you add someone to the project, or if they haven't been around that much, it's very easy for you to direct them on, okay, you can work on this area, and then they can easily understand, like what's going to be there and what's the mood for it, and such like that. So it's really easy to, like, you skip the point of having to unnecessarily communicate every time you do something or change something to make sure it's right.
Oh yeah.
So that's a really useful thing about it as well.
And it's like, for me personally, you might have noticed my thoughts kind of race from one point to another. Should have like organized my notes a little bit more. But when putting like this thing down from the start, like prevents that from being a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good cover of, how we do the mapping.
It was a little bit messy how I presented it, but I hope everyone gained some insight.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, for the person who asked the question earlier, we're going to do, like, if you have any questions, note them down. We're going to do a Q&A session afterwards when we're done with everything. So just make sure, if you have an important question, keep that and then ask it later. And you should be fine. So thank you, Marcus, for presenting the City Living scale map. Very cool. So yeah, clap. So we can now move back into the museum again, go to the entrance, and we're going to have Tom talk in a second about his section.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. So take it away, Tom.
Yeah. So if you could all just make your way to section 2 for those of you who are here in the world. So for those who joined us a bit late, hi, I'm Frank. You can call me Tom if you want. I work for the Noxcrew, like all the other people here. So I'm going to do a section regarding color boxing, which is a concept probably most builders nowadays are quite familiar with. So basically, the idea behind color boxing is to basically save time by wasting some, if that makes sense. Because the whole idea behind it is to basically outline a build, considering its different sections and considering the purpose of what everything does within the build, in order to avoid making mistakes while basically winging it, which obviously makes you waste time at some point. It's particularly useful when you're working on builds that aren't necessarily straight, so like 30-degree angle builds or 45-degree angle builds, as they allow you to see whether or not you've made a miscalculation at some point, which is going to lead to conflicts within the different parts of your structure. So on part one, the build one, which you see in front of you if you're standing there, is basically 2 different steps of color boxing. The first one being the simple highlight and outline of your build structure, which takes into consideration the different areas you want to focus on and the different depths your build may have. Then on the right, you have a slightly more detailed version of that, which allows you to position windows and pillars and basically decoration that you wouldn't have put on before. One of the good things about this particular stage, where you've got basically everything simplified and have added some of the details you want to add to your build, is it allows you to communicate to the rest of your team what you want to go for and what your build is going to be structured like. Which is good, because if that particular build that you're trying to do doesn't fit the vision of the team or for the project you're currently working on, it enables the rest of your team to warn you that this might not be fitting towards what you want to achieve, what the whole team wants to achieve concerning the map, which allows you to fix it rather quickly, basically, because this takes you a very short time to build compared to a fully detailed structure. So if you move to part 2, this one represents basically the next step, which is detailing and adding different sections. The reason why I've highlighted the different sections of the build in this particular stage is if you do that, you can actually see whether or not you accomplish what you want to accomplish, and it also is a way of people to communicate what section they may or may not like. So, for example, if somebody disliked the pattern or the textures on the red section, it's really easy to highlight it, because they just basically go there and say, yes, this red section isn't good, instead of going, oh, that window over there or the second floor and whatnot. Obviously, once everything's been talked about with the rest of your team and everybody's happy with everything, you can move on to removing all the structures, which is what's going on in build number 3 here, which is the basically finished build and everything removed. So that's kind of a stage you go out once everybody's agreed on what needs or needn't be achieved anymore with that particular structure. Moving on, you have at the end here a small skeleton, which is a mech skeleton. So that particular one is another aspect of color boxing, which I'm sure people have talked about in the organic masterclass. But in this particular case, it's for a mech, which, depending on what style you want to accomplish with your structure, you may or may not want to color box in that particular manner. So say you're going for something particularly geometrical, which doesn't necessarily flow much as an organic, and wants more to feel like very clunky or very cartoonish, you may want to structure it in that particular manner, because you'll have basically a lot of straight angles, and color boxing enables you to basically see what works, what doesn't, but it also allows you to adjust everything in terms of size. So say you're unhappy with the leg height, you can adjust that during color boxing, which avoids you having to do it with a full body, which will require a lot more work to actually correct. So it allows you to avoid making mistakes, which would cost you a lot of time if the build would be fully finished. Now, moving on, in the blue section, in number 1, this would be a vertical room. So the red blocks represent the walls around a building, for example. So this is to represent the purpose or effectiveness of color boxing whilst during interiors. So section 1 is basically an empty building, and we want to build an interior in it. We make our way to section 2, which is where basically we use different colors to shape how we want the rooms to be laid out. So the colors enable us to visualize basically the size of the different rooms and whether or not we'll be able to fit everything we want to fit in them. So in that particular case, you've got 2 rooms and a corridor. So you've got the room which is represented through the green line, the room through the pink line, and then the blue lines are for bathrooms, because most of the times you want those. So basically, then we move on to 3, which is where you fill in the floor with the different colors of these rooms. And that enables you to have a better visualization of the general proportions of everything, because then you truly understand whether or not your apartments are of a corresponding size, or whether or not they're big enough to fit everything you want in them. And you can also isolate the corridor. One of the good things about this is that it allows people to basically build an interior with these particular colors, and then you can have that. If you say you build the entire interiors like this for one floor without adding any detail into it, you can copy and paste that up the different floors, and then you can change the different colors because you used very obvious materials for different rooms. So you'll have the same rooms, but the whole building will feel different because you'll be able to use different materials from the start, basically. And it will be much easier to identify which room you haven't done and which room you have done, which is also a good thing for communicating with your team how much you've progressed with the current task you've been doing. So that's it for me. I mean, it's pretty simple. If any of you have questions, feel free to ask them later after the masterclass.
Yep.
So UP, if you want to take over.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Tom. More claps. So now we can on move out to the number 3 section, which is technically Tor's section, so to say. But since Tor sadly can't talk today, I'm going to do my best to translate his transcript and make sure it's understandable. Tor, she's your pasta, sorry. She'll probably refer to us by usernames. So when you walk into this building, what you can see is what Tor has rendered or built for us as an accurate interpretation of a certain reference image, which can be shown on, if you're watching the stream, you should be able to see it on the screen quickly. And Tor, you can probably post that in event broadcast just to give a quick preview. Posted. So you should be able to see that. See, what it looks like. So from then on, I'll try to explain basically the process of how we did this. So when it comes to taking a reference image and translating it into Minecraft, there's a few very important aspects when you do that. First of all, most images have a certain mood, but also a certain, like essentially the setting. And so an important part, of course, for any build really is accomplishing the palette. But what reference images allows you to do very easily is see the colors in the image, and then you can translate that by, getting the appropriate blocks. And for example, when it comes to wood, since we have a lot of variations of wood, you can try to use the type which is most like suiting for what you're trying to recreate. And so once you've got your palette laid down, which of course can be a lot of things, but what Tor did for when he recreated this was he made the like definitive features of the build first. So in this case, this would be the pillars, or it's essentially like the anchors of the build itself. So the way you do that, when you do that, you get kind of like Tom was teaching about when it comes to color boxing, that you can get a sense of the shape of what you're doing. So it's a good visual representation. And let's see. And then after he created the anchors, he started to build outwards actually rather than around them. And the reason he did that is to keep like a perception of scale, to make sure you didn't lose that in the process. And an important thing to mention, once you actually build something from a reference image, of course you want that to be visible at all times. So if you have 2 screens, 2 monitors, you can slap it on the left side. Or if you just have 1 screen, try to keep a separate tab open at all times that you can easily access quickly, so to like check that you didn't make any mistakes. So after that we have, let's see. Oh yeah, so there's a reason why this golden block is here as well. Now, when you make something from a reference image, if you want it to be as accurate as possible, it's very good to have a focal point in the building that you yourself can stand in to make sure that the actual build translates accurately to your reference image. So you see when I stand on this gold block, as you saw before, the actual building itself looked accurate to the scale of the reference image. It's a good way to check, for example, how tall your anchors or your pillars are supposed to be, making sure that the level for the roof is right and such. So it's just a general good rule to have one focal point that you can always go back to and make sure everything's good. So moving on from this little thing over here, we actually have actually I'm going to make a tour. I don't think I missed anything, right? Anything that's good? All right, cool. So next section is this beautiful recreational palace, which is, I think there's a sign somewhere saying what it is. I didn't miss that. Oh yeah, here we go. So this is a recreation. It's a build from Hitman, which is Paris. So this is like very common architecture that you will see in Paris if you ever visit there. So let's see. Right. So a very important aspect as well is when you translate a build into Minecraft, we have to make some exceptions to make the build more readable. And readability is essentially that when you think about buildings in real life, they have very distinguishable dimensions, as in, we don't have half slabs that we can stick on walls. We have to do with the 1x1 block radius presented to us with Minecraft. So we have some limitations that we need to be able to work around. And so you can see in this build, we have is this a good time to maybe post the reference image for that as well, for people to get a good understanding in chat? Hold on. Right. Can you? Okay, yeah. Can you post that in broad event or broadcast event again? Yep. So, and we can get that image on screen, the second reference image. That would be great. So, as you should be able to see now from the screen, you can see that the original creation in all its glory. And if you switch back to normal Minecraft again, you should be able to see that we made some exceptions. For example, the materials used in the original build presented it gave this kind of cold feeling because they had some different materials which aren't really it's very hard to find that same palette within Minecraft. So what we did instead, what Tor did instead, was he picked a palette which was suitable to expand upon. So he picked blocks that worked well together and gave the building a bit more of a vibrant feeling, whilst also being able to add as many details as possible with the variations of, for example, sandstone and jungle stairs, I think that is, jungle wood, with the combination of other materials that work together. And then we have a final render that from the actual build itself you can see put together. So if you can get the render on the screen, that would be great. And Tor, if you can post that in event broadcast again. You can see that we did, we rendered, or Tor had his build rendered by, I don't know who rendered it, if it was you or someone else. Okay, Only is the guy who rendered that. So you can see that in the render of the image, if you would look at the reference image as well, the mood has changed a bit. But in this case, I'm fairly certain Toys wanted to grab the structural integrity of that building and make sure that he basically translated that in Minecraft to the best of his ability, which I think he did a very good job of. And it looks very nice, in my opinion. So yeah, I think that's essentially it mostly. I don't think I missed anything too specific. Nope. All right. So thank you, Tor, for building these examples and for giving me a transcript. I messed up on a few things, but I hope most of you were able to still comprehend what was happening. So there's a little hallway in the wooden mansion thing that you can follow to get to the next step. And we can move on to section 4, which is going to be Jake's section with his mace. So Jake, go on.
Yes, hello. So I'm basically going to be talking about the process that goes into creating essentially the entire level of what would be a game or a Minecraft map or something, and the advantages of planning and the process that goes into it. So we're starting with a small plan of I think a puzzle is a strong word for it, but it has puzzle elements. It's kind of a level with puzzle elements. So it's basically a series of doorways that you have to find a way to get through. I guess I should, yes, I'll explain the level first and then explain the thoughts I had while I designed it. So if you go to the entrance, you'll notice the first thing you see is a blue doorway that is closed. The only other option is to go down the hole. So we drop down the hole. You are then surrounded by other doorways which would be closed. Any coloured box, consider that as a doorway that is closed. So the only way we can go from here is down this corridor, which leads to a red pillar. Now this represents, it would either be a lever or an item in a chest that enables you to unlock the red door. So we've now unlocked the red door, and as we go through, we are greeted with another door and a staircase up. Now remember, this door will be closed, the blue door, so the only option is to go up the staircase. Once we get up the staircase, we have a drop down, which means we can't go back the way we came. But we have a blue pillar, which represents, again, either a lever or an object to open the blue door. Now this blue door is the blue door we saw right at the beginning of the level, which would now be open. And we drop down again. Now this aspect, we are reusing the level. So this is kind of handy if you've only got a small amount of space. You're actually reusing elements of the build and going back on yourself. But we have now unlocked the blue door that we saw earlier, which allows us to open both a yellow door and a green door. The green door is the exit, which we also saw earlier, but the yellow door is a room that we have to go back on ourselves. And this is just for a optional extra of it'd be bonus loot or maybe a collectible item, something like that. And like I said, we have now also unlocked the green door, which is the exit. So things I considered while designing this. Like I said, when you walk in, the first thing you see is the blue door, but also through the blue door, you can actually see the exit immediately. Now with signposting and level design, because obviously it's not just going to be a big green door on the other side, you'd make that obvious that maybe that's the exit. You'd use lighting and things like that. We also have, when we drop down, another metal grate area which shows us both the green lever and the yellow lever. And straight behind us we have a yellow door. So immediately, before we can even get to either of these things, we can maybe get a hint that we need to get into that room to unlock this yellow door. And again, with the blue door, you can see the green lever before you ever get to the green door. Let me just check my notes. So yeah, other things to do with planning, the things that make it a good idea is if you're tight on space, doing things like this where the level is stacked on top of each other, it takes up half the amount of space. Like I said, using areas of the build twice, so you have to go back on yourself. Also good for making the level feel longer without using any more space. So I think we can move on to the next step now, which is through this door.
Through the exit.
Yes, through the exit.
Could have been signposted better.
I haven't done the signposting tutorial yet.
Yeah, exactly. We can't do signposting yet. We haven't done the tutorial. So this is basically a full-sized version of what we just saw. We've just added walls and a little bit more detail, but it's the same level. Things we have to consider when going to a full-sized level. Obviously, the size increases, so we need to be careful about the player being able to kill themselves or damage themselves when we don't want them to. So we need to be careful of falls, which is why I've added a pit of water below this one, so that the player is less likely to seriously hurt themselves, and maybe if they were low health, they may have killed themselves, and it's not a very satisfying death. Other things to consider are making sure that your line of sight still works on areas that you wanted to be able to see. So if we go to this metal grate, we can still see the yellow and green pillars. And also adding a little bit of height differences just makes the level slightly more interesting. In the plan, pretty much the two levels, everything was on the same height. And in this one, we have just added slight changes in height so that you have just makes the level slightly more interesting. But as you can see, these corridors are still pretty plain. This is essentially just instead of a color boxing, it's essentially just a gray box to get an idea of how the level is going to play. At this stage, you can add mechanics and rig these doors to work to see if the level is going to play correctly, instead of building the entire thing to completion and then adding mechanics. It's probably a good idea to test it out at this stage when you've only put, let's say, a few hours work into it maximum. So yes, we also have sort of so the staircase looked bad on the full scale, so I've had to make it, a lot more, sort of increase the size and space that it used up to keep it sort of realistic and pleasant to look at. And you should also be considering what kind of theming you're going to do at this stage of the design. I had the vision of it being a sort of sewer level or an underground dungeon kind of level. So I kept that in my mind when I was designing the areas, which we will see next. So if we walk through the exit, which is the green doorway, you will see a color palette, which is something I would throw together once I'm ready to start detailing the level. You don't have to use all the colors. It was just what blocks am I likely going to use? What blocks do I think will work well together? And yeah, so if we follow the walkway. So this is the essentially finished version of the map, just with no mechanics, and the doorways are still obviously labeled for the purpose of this tutorial, basically. But we have designed it to look much more pleasant to look at, a kind of dingy sewer design, and the level still plays roughly the same. We have marked the areas with either an emerald, redstone block, diamond, or gold block. Retrospectively. And so yes, we'd hit the red lever, sorry, that opens the red door. We've now added lighting as well, which should lead the player's attention to areas you want them to go. We've added little side areas which don't actually go anywhere, but make the level feel like it's part of a bigger world. And yes, that's about it, I think, for this. I think, let me just check my notes. Yeah, other than design elements like adding kind of secondary or fake purposes to rooms. So don't just have it as a room, kind of try and make it look like it has a purpose within the sewer. So, you know, adding waterways and little bridges and maybe pipes and whatnot, just to create a element of realism that this could be believably a sewer system. And also variations in both size and height again, so that we're not just walking around a flat level. We're going up and down, things to look at, going from larger rooms to smaller rooms, just to keep the player engaged. And also it creates good areas for mob fights. So in the larger rooms in this level, we would probably spawn mobs so that they have to have a little fight area before moving on to the next stage of the dungeon. So I think we can leave this now, and I reckon that's that stage complete. So I will pass it on to Lucas again. Or you,
Yes, thank you, Jake. That was really cool. Clap, clap, more claps. Yeah, awesome. So we're moving on to the final section so far. And I hope all of you have enjoyed it thus far. It's been a lot of fun for us to work on it. So section number 5, which is going to be signposting. So as soon as you walk in here, you can see a little preview of the first level, so to say. So if you walk down the staircase, we'll be presented with what is essentially an empty desert, or not even a desert. This is actually supposed to be a planet, like Mars, for example, but since we don't have anything to tell us that this is Mars, we can't really see much. So the point of signposting is making it clear where a player is supposed to be, and without having us basically shoving it down their throats, because that's just generally annoying. So signposting is a very big part of level design, due to the fact that it's it is essentially what level design is, making sure that the level is designed properly to translate and make sure that the player does what we want them to do. So in this little desert thing I made, I have essentially no signposting whatsoever, other than the fact that we have a green patch to symbolize point A, and then all the way over here we have a little red pit that you can fall down to. Yeah, thanks, Ryo. Anyway, we have point B, which is like essentially a little red pit that you can fall down to. So we want to translate for the player that they're supposed to go from point A to point B. So how do you do that? Now, before we jump down into the pit and move on to the next section, I'll talk about some things that you can think about to basically, signpost. So in this design, there's actually one type of signposting we have, which is, since this is terrain, we have different levels on the terrain. We have some mountain peaks, and the only thing I've done is I placed the starting point, so point number A, which is the green little bit, on a high mountain peak, well, medium high. So when you do this, from this view, you will still be able to see the red pit. But for example, if I would have switched the places, so you would have started at the red pit, and then your point was to go to the little green place, you would literally have no clue where to go because you can't see it from your starting point, and there's nothing currently like leading you towards your goal. And some of the points that you've probably seen throughout the tutorial so far, the masterclass, Marcus talked a bit about buildings and having vocal buildings for the players to be able to. It's essentially the apartments we want to be clear, so people know that this is the house I can interiorate or make interior for myself. And the way we did that was making it very vibrant. We made it look. We had it in a setting which was very. It kind of had all the other structures were kind of in the back, and it looked more important by adding more detail to present that.
Also, we did place a sign telling you to go inside the building, but
yeah, of course, that's something you can do as well. But you know, making sure it's part of the environment of what you're trying to do is essential. And since it's in a big city, it makes sense to have a sign saying, "Oh, this is like bank," or "This is an apartment," or whatever. And another thing Jake talked about briefly was signposting his maze by adding, for example, lighting. He had a few torches in focal points of his maze. So if you ever got lost, you could kind of go by the lights. And he also did briefly like various levels of height and such. So you can kind of vocalize importance of what doors and such by making them stand out in that sense. Contrast is also very important in this aspect. So you would obviously have the door be something like maybe a different material or have more detail on it, unless you want it to be a secret door, so people know that, you know, this is a door, I'm supposed to go through it. So, and one final thing actually, if you were here yesterday and watched HTCO3's tutorial on trees and foliage, he mentioned briefly how you can use trees, which is a very good tip, is you can use trees and kind of put them in the background and make a shape to kind of vocalize a waypoint. So you would have a structure in the middle, he had a church, and then you'd have trees kind of diagonally placed to point you towards the actual church. And since trees have very low contrast to the rest of the environment, it was a very good way to kind of symbolize that, making a linear way for you to follow. So let's move on to the slightly more interesting part of a section which is actually detailed. So if you jump down the red pit and walk through the museum entrance again, it's a bit of a deja vu, you can see that we've added quite a few more things. We have some very big structures. We have a few plants, especially in the background. And we also have a vocal point, which I have represented right now, which is the red exclamation mark. And I'll tell you some things you can do instead of having a big red exclamation mark to make it interesting. So immediately, when you jump down to this platform, first of all, you have your sights. This is kind of a way to trick people to point them towards the direction. So when you first come here, you're pointed directly the way you're supposed to go, since we went through a long hallway entrance, which was directed towards our goal, which is to get to the red exclamation mark. And so another way, well, it's essentially like how you make paths. You can of course make them linear if you want them to be very direct goals, but if you're making non-linear paths, so you would have, for example, a maze like Jake did, having kind of check marks to make sure you're going in the right way. So let's say you could have small red exclamation marks, but inserted with another object. So light, for example, Jake used light sources to make sure going a way that leads somewhere. It's a good way to represent that. So a way that you can essentially, you trick the player to go somewhere, which is what signposting is. So we have elements in the planet, and you also have, you know, this is supposed to be like a space rocket station without the rocket right now, and you can also see some kind of space plants, I guess you could say. So now you've symbolized that this is supposed to be in space, which is a very good thing because you've established a theme for what you're doing. And why it's important to establish a theme is because people associate different themes with different important objects. So, for example, in a dungeon, you would have doors be an important object. So you always want to look out for doors. And in a city, larger buildings are most of the time, and buildings with more colors and such are usually something which means it's important. And so, for example, here, since we're on space station kind of thing, rockets are usually a thing that you want to keep a lookout for, or, you know, kind of entrance to bunkers and such. So that's why theming is generally important. And you kind of have an example of using some of the plants in the background to make it feel like it's actually part of the background, even though it's in a 3-dimensional space. It kind of pushes you towards giving the atmosphere more directed towards the center. And this is also something that's presented with the structures. There's a reason why they are like adjacent to each other. When you have a sense of symmetry, the focal point will usually be in the middle of that symmetrical structure. So, for example, if I would have had one of these structures on the side and then a completely different one to the right, you wouldn't assume that the center between them had any importance because they themselves didn't have any connections. And then another obvious example is, you know, having staircases and having kind of paths you could have. For example, if you had a grass path, you can make the path a different color to symbolize that, you know, this is a rundown path, so people who walk there probably walk there too. In this case, we just have a staircase in the center and a little platform that you can walk up to, and that's usually something that people are drawn to. So for the exclamation mark, things you could have here instead would be, it's actually something that could fit in this setting since it's a space like sci-fi setting. So you could have this be a type of hologram, which is a good way of adding contrast since holograms are usually like really blue picturey things. So compared to the very gray and kind of less contrasty background, bringing a slice of color in the center focal point grabs attention very easily. Another thing you could do is if we actually had a rocket ready to launch from the space station, that in itself can be a very clear focal point, since the rocket would usually be, for example, white or just any other color you can add to the rocket itself. And rockets are also generally a thing that people think rockets are cool, so they're drawn to them in this setting. So people would want to check out the rocket, and we want them to go that way. So that's a good thing. So yeah, I think those are some of my most general points when it comes to signposting. And that's a bit of an abrupt ending, but I think I've gone over everything. Let me check quickly. Yeah, so that's it from everything we've done so far, at least. Hope you all enjoyed it, what we had to say. We're going to do some questions in a moment. But yeah, I want to say a quick thanks to everyone from Noxcrew and excluding me, who voluntarily helped working on this. We're a marketplace team, so we're quite busy most of the time. But it was really fun to work on this with everyone, and I hope all of you learned something from it. So yeah, let's move on to questions so far. Does anyone have any specific questions about different parts? You can type it in either general chat, or you can type it in, I think, let me check the stream as well so I don't forget that. Okay, boom. So yeah, any questions about any points? Yeah, just most chats we will be able to check. I know someone had a question about something Marcus was saying earlier as well. If you want to ask that now, now's the time.
Also, just TP to me if you want to get back to the main hallway.
Yeah, we can always move back to the sections if you're wondering about certain thing. Let's see. Someone asked how long it takes to plan a project. Like, oh yeah, Marcus, you can answer that.
Oh yeah, I did that in one sweaty weekend. Like, it might take longer, but it was fortunate in this case. I had I do a lot of walking through different cities. I travel quite a bit, so from the start I had a good idea how it's gonna work together. But the more unfamiliar a theme is to you, or a certain setting is to you, more it's gonna take like time to research it before you start laying down the plan. In this case, just 2 days, but could be longer.
Do everyone have one gem in the team? No, we like Marcus. He's the leader of the level design team. So he's the one responsible for giving us tasks usually. So all of us are very like we know a bit of everything, but obviously some of us have stronger sides for stronger things.
Yeah.
But usually, you know, we make it so Marcus makes sure we have like everyone has enough work, and when we have a plan like Marcus represented with the small city scale map, it's very easy for us to also just like if we feel like doing something, like if we've been building structures all day and we want to make something else, we can always refer back to that map and be like, oh, no one has done the windmill yet, or no one's done the this mountain detailing, and we can do that and just make sure we notify people. We have we use different what's called like organizing tools. For example, I think like Trello is one that most people are very familiar with. We also have Slack for general communication, and then we use Asana, which is like it's basically like Trello. So you have different cards with different assignments.
Yeah, and usually I try to make sure that people can do a variety of tasks, so
yes,
nobody gets bored doing just one
Marcus
thing.
is very good at his job. That's why we're happy working.
Although we do have one guy who just builds toilets.
Oh, poor Chris. So where do you use that over Trello? I can't answer that specifically. It's like a company decision. I don't know if Marcus knows about it, but it's like we have a build team, but we also have artists, we have mechanics, so we're not the only ones to use that. So when we create a new project like City Living, for example, we have tasks for the builders and then tasks for the artists and blah blah, so we can all see it on the same board. Let's see. I'm kind of curious about the IKEA observation looking tower.
Oh yeah, I can explain that. So since the map is a creative toolbox, it, like I said, it has a lot of different entities that the players can place. And the IKEA in every map of that sort acts as a small showcase where the player spawns at the start. where like you have different very small environments where we use the furniture, for example. That's why it's called an IKEA, because it has like small rooms, for example, like a small kitchen with all the different kitchen entities we provide. And it also houses like a tutorial on how to use, like, for example, the furniture rotation tool, and like what's the purpose of the map and stuff like that.
Right. Someone asked earlier as well, what do you use the maps for? So we make maps for the marketplace, which is, if you're unfamiliar with that, it's there's two types of versions of Minecraft, which is one is the Java version, which is the one we're playing on right now. And then there's the Bedrock version, which is for consoles like Xbox, PlayStation, and such. And that version of Minecraft has a little market that it's like a store, a separate store, so you can buy different maps from different creators. Noxcrew, most of us here work full time as creators, making these maps with different mechanics and textures and builds for people to buy and enjoy. It's a very fun job to have, you're saying, to be able to do that. Let's see. Usually, how many people work on a project like that and for how long? Well, we have all level designers available since most of us work full time. It's essentially we all work on one project and then move over to the next. Sometimes maybe if we have two projects at once, we kind of split it up. But yeah, it's just everyone works on what we have to work on, and there's usually always work. Well, there is always work, but so usually how many people? Okay, yeah, that's one. Do you make plugins for your maps or do you use command blocks? Bedrock uses. I'm not expert at that, but I know Bedrock has like I think they use like command blocks to do things, right? Do you know that, Marcus?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, data packs. That's it as well. So when it comes to mechanics, we configure the different data packs to edit entities and such.
I can answer the tough question if you want.
Yeah, sure, of course. Other people can answer as well.
Oh yeah, but like I mean, I don't think anything like BuildCon gets affected at all from having a commercial outlet for Minecraft.
Yeah,
like if anything, it'll just bring more people to Minecraft that way.
Let's see, where can we find some of your creation? Well, we have we got a Twitter and we have a website too. So the Twitter is used at Noxcrew, and if you search up Noxcrew on Google, you should be able to find a website immediately. And we have a like about section and some of our creations on the website, so you can have a look there.
I mean, check out our YouTube. We do trailers for each.
Oh yeah,
YouTube
good,
as well.
Actually. That's a very good overview. You can, if you search up City Living Noxcrew on YouTube, you'll be able to see the finished version of this tiny mini map, or the trailer for it at least. So that's a good visual thing to see. Okay, this is what it looks like, tiny scale, and then when we actually made it. What is your guys' creative process like before even placing a block? I mean, it's essentially this map thing that Mark is talking about. This is like because then we get the opportunity to kind of brainstorm about the different sections, and all of us get a very good, as a team together, we get a good overview of, okay, this is what it's going to look like. And once we have this, we can just like look at, the different things to do. So if I want to make,
we can find like reference material.
Yeah, exactly.
And even before all of that, we will have a Google document specifying what the map is going to be and what the build needs and whatnot.
Yep.
Yes. And I guess one thing to point out, which is kind of important, is like we are not like even close to the most like how do you say it, aesthetically pleasing builders, because that's not the goal. Like, we build for gameplay
Yeah.
and what the player is actually doing most of the
Yeah.
time. So we even tend to we tend to do more like simple and readable stuff these days rather than go all out on like the fancy details, which I love, but some people find them hard to read.
Yeah. The marketplace is, targeted towards kids. So our main priority is making sure that both the gameplay and then the visualization, which builds are part of, is readable for kids. That's the priority, and that's what we focus on. Of course, we're still able to detail things and make things look nice. It's just like the type of aesthetic, like Marcus was saying, is appropriated towards kids in that sense. How do you guys decide what theme to go with when creating a map? Do you guys use concept art any times? I mean, Marcus, do you want to talk about that again?
Well, we don't exactly use concept art, but we usually have people building like small concepts of like on our concept server before we start like the actual build, and usually we end up using those concepts like straight up in the map. But we don't have like a concept artist, which would be good, but
yeah. Let's see. Do you have kids to test the maps before they go into the marketplace? No, we don't. All of us are under NDA, so we can't really hire kids to be play testers for us.
But we have people with like kids' minds, so
yeah,
it makes up for that.
Exactly. We're all adults in kids' bodies, but yeah. Noxcrew themselves as an entity have been making like maps for I think 8 years recently. That's how old it is. And when the marketplace came out, we've been constantly adapting to make sure that the feedback we get from people is we make it appropriate for kids and try our best with that, and usually works out. Do you all ever get burnt out? How do you deal with that?
Yes.
Yes. Talk about it. No. So I mean, any person can get burnt out. You just like have a creative block. But the way since we're a team and we work in Minecraft, we it's a very chill experience, right? If you would compare this to a desktop job at some apartment, it's a very like friendly and happy environment, and all of us are very positive towards each other, and there's constant feedback and like positive feedback, as in we acknowledge what we do. We even have a channel on our Slack which is used for posting things we're proud of, and people give claps and such. So we're like very close when it comes to company standards. So it's not very often you'd see anyone get burned out in an environment from that like that. You guys are all trained in QA when level designing. Well, yeah, I mean, kinda. It's like I'm personally, I've never gone to quality assurance course, but all of us as builders and as we're all interested in this, I think we have a good sense of understanding in the first place. And then, of course, like I'm quite new to Noxcrew as well. I haven't even been here in more than a year, or well, I've been in less than a year. But you have people like Marcus and Jake who have been here since the start, so you learn constantly from each other.
Yes, you do. Like I'm technically not supposed to say this, but like some of our earlier maps, you can see that we were still learning.
Yeah, and that goes for any team or anything really. How old is the youngest member of the team? I think that would be me, probably. Tor is also, she surpassed is technically also the same age as me, but he's a few months older. So that makes me the youngest. And I'm 17, by the way. I turned 17 quite recently. So even though, I do work full time, I don't do school anymore because I do this full time, but I still do a few courses on my spare time for like things I'm interested in. But since it's the company and they give me the opportunity to do it, it's what I like compared to what I did at school. I feel like I'm learning more versus on like a personal level and educational level as well from just working here. What does the onboarding process look like for your team? Do you do training on your tools, or is it learning by doing or learning by burning? Marcus, you probably have more experience in that question than I do.
Yeah, it's usual. Like, I mean, I only know about the builder or level designer side of it, but usually just start by doing smaller tasks, and like we don't do anything that complicated at the end of the day. Like, you just come in, tell you what to do, see what happens. Could be more professional, but it works so far.
How do you guys go about creating mechanics? Well, we're level designers, so we got 2 people doing mechanics. Well, the 2 main people we have doing mechanics is Avondale, Joe, and also a guy called Gamer Stew. Sadly, they're not in this masterclass. I don't know. I don't
Gamer
think.
Stew is on the server.
Wait, is he?
Is he? Oh yeah.
Oh, really? Hey, Stew's there.
Hello, Stu.
Still
So
stalking us like usual.
yeah,
Also,
I
don't
guess
forget
you can message Stu about that actually if you want some intel of that, or maybe you can discuss it in public chat, whatever. Let's see. In the end, it's the same map. It's gonna go, yeah. So I think I've answered most questions that have been thrown at us so far. Anything else that you guys want to know about?
If there's a like certain question for me, like ask it now because I have to go.
Oh yeah. We're already like 20 minutes past the deadline supposedly, but so if there's anything you want to know from Marcus or Antlaya or like about city scaling maps, since he's the one who planned that mainly. Well, I don't think so. Thank you for coming, Marcus. And well, you're not coming directly. You know what? I think this is a good place to use stop. We talked about a lot of things. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed what we presented. If you have any additional questions later, you can, if you think of anything, you can message any of us and we'll gladly answer it. This was the first masterclass I've done, and it's the first masterclass I think any of us has done. Tom has a bit more experience with it, with New Heaven, but I think it went well. So yeah, thank you all for being here, and that's it for us for Noxcrew.